Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the war-torn rice fields and smoking mountaintop strongholds of medieval Japan, where power wasn't passed down gently, but seized with bloodied hands. Picture this, it's the 15th century, and you're trudging through a muddy road flanked by half-burnt villages. The smell of ash clings to everything. Men in straw armor shuffle past you, eyes darting. Somewhere nearby, a conch shell horn blows, someone's about to die, and it might be you. Welcome to the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states. Before you settle in, take a second to like and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy the content I'm sharing with you. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from, and what time it is right now. Drop it in the comments. Go ahead and lower the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's slowly drift into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a high hill overlooking a jagged patchwork of provinces, each ruled by its own powerful lord, or daimyō. But don't let the polite term fool you. These were not gentle nobles. These were hardened warlords, some raised on the battlefield, others molded in backrooms of betrayal and smoke-filled war councils. They didn't inherit power as much as snatch it, holding on by the edge of their blades. Japan isn't one kingdom right now, it's more like 60 little countries constantly stabbing each other in the dark. The emperor still technically exists, somewhere, tucked away like an old doll behind glass. And there's a shogun too, just not one anybody listens to. The real rulers are the daimyō, and their only goal is to survive long enough to outlive their enemies. Historians still argue whether this fractured era began with one ambitious general or a slow erosion of central power, but what's not in question is the chaos that followed. Imagine your local government is a man with half an eyebrow, 5,000 screaming soldiers, and a castle built on a cliff. He taxes you, protects you, and might execute you if your rice yield disappoints. Sounds cozy, right? You glance over at the Ashigaru conscripts lining up at the base of the hill. Some are as young as 12. No one here fights because they want to. They fight because refusing means disgrace, or death. The daimyō don't tolerate disobedience. Even the minor ones can command armies that stretch for miles. You're not dealing with a polite aristocrat in a powdered wig. You're dealing with a man who once set an entire village on fire because it annoyed him. One of the more infamous daimyō, Oda Nobunaga, yes, he'll show up later, was known to boil his enemies alive. Another, Takeda Shingen, dressed his troops like a mobile thunderstorm and was buried sitting upright so he could keep an eye on future battles. True story. Or, maybe. Some scholars still debate whether that story is poetic fiction or historical fact, but it tells you everything you need to know about how people saw these men. Almost mythical. Definitely terrifying. Let's talk daily life. You're a peasant under a daimyō's rule, and every sound outside your door might be a raid, a tax collector, or worse, a recruitment call. You pray your lord doesn't lose a battle nearby, because if he does, the winning army is probably heading straight toward your rice field, and they are not bringing snacks. The landscape is more than just beautiful mountains and peaceful bamboo forests. It's a terrain of surveillance and suspicion. Castle watchtowers spot movement miles away, and spies slither through the underbrush like snakes in sandals. It's tempting to romanticize it all. Samurai honor, fluttering banners, cherry blossoms falling dramatically in the wind. But for most people living through it, this era was one long anxiety attack. You never knew if your lord would be murdered tomorrow, leaving your province open to a rival. And when daimyō fell, they rarely did so quietly. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, you're in the early 1500s, perched in a bamboo forest outside a daimyō's stronghold. The air is thick with mist. Inside that fortress? Strategy meetings that sound like horror movie scripts. Daimyō aren't just warriors, they're psychological tacticians. Some use Buddhist rituals to bless their blades. Others use monks to spread ghost stories in enemy villages, making peasants too scared to sleep. One warlord allegedly claimed to be a reincarnated thunder god. Whether he believed it or not, his enemies certainly did. It wasn't all brute force. Feudal Japan ran on a delicate blend of fear and loyalty, but mostly fear. And daimyō cultivated that with precision. Want a promotion? Prove it by bringing your rival's head. Want to keep your castle? Better sleep with one eye open. Even loyal retainers weren't safe. Betrayal was so common that one lord kept a scroll listing the most likely traitors among his staff. That scroll was updated weekly. Meanwhile, you're still just trying to get home before sunset. Bandits prowl the roads, some former samurai turned desperate. And even the forests aren't safe. One daimyō famously hid entire units of spearmen in tree groves, springing on travelers like a live-action horror trap. If you're lucky, your lord is just ambitious, not sadistic. But luck is rare in this period. Most daimyō viewed civilian life as background noise. Useful when it fed their armies, expendable when it didn't. You hear distant drums now. That's not a festival. That's a call to arms. And here's the wild part. Many of these warlords started off as nobodies. Sons of minor samurai. Disinherited sons. Even adopted children. They rose not by bloodline but by sheer, ruthless strategy. You'd think that would make them more humble. Instead, it made them hungrier. One daimyō, Yusuji Kenshin, would order his soldiers to fight until death, and then apologize to them in prayer afterward. He was known as the God of War. But some historians suggest he may have secretly been a woman. Or at least intersex. The jury's still out. The point is, these daimyō weren't predictable. They weren't nice. And they weren't weak. They made medieval Japan a landscape of breathtaking beauty and constant dread. And you're standing in the middle of it all, with the night closing in, and those drums getting louder. You grip your sandals tighter as the earth shifts under your feet, because now you're stepping deeper into the world of the daimyō, the great feudal lords of Japan. But don't be fooled by the delicate calligraphy or the elegantly folded robes. The birth of the daimyō class wasn't a gentle process. It was forged in flame, blood, and betrayal. Originally, daimyō were just powerful landholders under the Kamakura and later the Muromachi shogunates. Think of them as regional managers with an unhealthy obsession with swords and personal armies. But as the Ashikaga shogunate began to lose control in the 15th century, a power vacuum yawned open across Japan, and boy, did these guys sprint to fill it. You probably imagine a samurai rising nobly through the ranks. But in this era, upward mobility often involved a lot more stabbing and a lot less HR paperwork. Many daimyō clawed their way up from minor samurai families, or even peasant stock, by exploiting war, marriage alliances, or sheer opportunism. The term gekkakujo became popular, the low overthrowing the high. It was less a proverb and more a warning. Let's say you're a lowly retainer. Your lord's an idiot. You whisper in the right ears, make a few discreet bribes, maybe help your lord meet an accidental end during a hunting trip. Next thing you know, you're wearing the crest, sitting in the big chair, and people are calling you my lord, while quietly wondering when your own hunting accident might happen. Historians still argue whether this chaotic ladder climbing was good for Japan or just prolonged the agony. But one thing is clear. Power wasn't inherited in the Sengoku Jidai, it was taken, often violently. Once you're in charge though, it's not all victory dances and war poetry. Daimyō had to defend what they took. They needed castles, alliances, weapons, and an unblinking eye. Betrayal could come from within, and usually did. Remember that old friend who helped you rise? Yeah, he probably wants your job now. To survive, daimyō surrounded themselves with an inner circle of retainers, samurai sworn to fight, advise, and occasionally spy. And here's the quirky twist, one of the most trusted retainers was often a tea master. No joke. The man preparing your mid-battle cup of matcha might also be the one feeding your enemies coded messages, or poison. Power meant paranoia. Daimyō developed complicated systems of hostage exchanges, sending wives, sons, or cousins to rival lords as guests to seal alliances. Of course, if the alliance broke, those guests stopped being guests very quickly. You're seeing the pattern now, right? Nothing in this world was sacred, not family, not religion, not even tea time. Take Saito Dosen, nicknamed the Viper of Mino. A ruthless oil merchant who rose to power by sheer cunning, He eventually married off his daughter to a rising warlord named Oda Nobunaga. Yes, that Oda Nobunaga. But even snakes can be eaten. His son betrayed him, and Nobunaga sided with the son. Dosen was cut down by his own flesh and blood. Father's Day wasn't a big hit that year. As a daimyo, you ruled your own slice of Japan like a mini-kingdom. You minted currency. You collected taxes. You built fortresses and filled them with troops. You managed peasant labor, drafted battle plans, and tried not to die in your sleep. Think you're busy now with email? Try ruling a province where literally everyone either wants to kill you or get a favor. Some daimyo tried to govern with a light hand, developing irrigation systems, standardizing measurements, even sponsoring poetry contests. But most knew the only language people respected was force. You didn't just protect your lands, you had to expand, or you'd be swallowed. And expansion meant constant war. It meant children growing up knowing the names of their father's enemies more intimately than the names of local flowers. Still, there was a weird code to it all. A daimyo was supposed to embody Bushido, the way of the warrior. Honor, duty, bravery. Except, that code was pretty flexible when politics got messy. A man might give an inspiring speech about loyalty in the morning, then poison his ally's rice bowl by lunch. Honor was less a moral compass and more of a performance, one you put on for your troops before marching them into unwinnable battles. And even when the daimyo wanted to follow the code, reality had other plans. Take the case of Yasuji Kenshin and Takeda Shingen, two legendary daimyo with a long-standing rivalry. One story goes that Kenshin once sent Shingen emergency supplies after learning the Takeda clan was starving during a siege. Respectful, right? Or maybe it was a clever PR move. Historians still debate whether Kenshin was truly noble, or just really good at building a brand. Let's not forget the aesthetics. Daimyo weren't just warriors, they were patrons of the arts. Their war banners featured haiku. Their armor was lacquered and dyed in colors chosen for symbolic impact. Some even carried fans into battle, painted with tigers, dragons, or Buddhist sutras. You had to look terrifying, but stylishly so. Still, fashion didn't always save you. One daimyo, Imagawa Yoshimoto, strutted into battle with over 25,000 troops, fully confident in his silk robes and elite cavalry. He was ambushed and beheaded by Oda Nobunaga and his much smaller force. That battle, Okahazama, became a turning point in history. And a lesson: pride goeth before a beheading. So now you're seeing it. The daimyo weren't born monsters. They became terrifying through a mix of necessity, brutality, and ambition. They ruled not with divine right, but with the raw authority of sharpened steel and unblinking eyes. You could love them, fear them, admire their calligraphy, but you'd never trust them. And the scariest thing? They didn't see themselves as villains. They saw themselves as survivors, builders, heroes of their own epics. Whether history agrees, well, that depends on who won the last war. And as the sun starts to set over your current lord's castle, banners fluttering, soldiers drilling, hawks circling, you feel the weight of that reality sink in. You're not just living under a daimyo. You're living under a man who built his life on ashes, and expects you to help him build a bigger fire. You're standing at the edge of a vast rice paddy now, ankle deep in mud, staring up at the skeletal outline of a towering fortress carved into a mountain. This is no romantic little keep with red paper lanterns and wind chimes. This is a Yamashiro, a Japanese mountain castle, and it is the terrifying centerpiece of a daimyo's power. From the outside, it looks like the mountain itself has grown teeth. Walls of stone snake up the incline, topped by wooden watchtowers bristling with archers. The paths leading in are tight, zigzagging, and deliberately confusing. One wrong step and you might tumble into a pit filled with bamboo spikes, or worse, find yourself face to face with a smiling gatekeeper whose job it is to stall you just long enough for backup to arrive. You're not visiting here. You're invading, whether you mean to or not. These fortresses weren't just homes, they were symbols. A daimyo without a strong castle was like a shark without teeth, dead on arrival. And unlike the lowland castles that would come later in the Edo period, the ones that look like wedding cakes, Yamashiro were harsh, practical, and brutal. Made to withstand sieges. Designed to confuse invaders. And incredibly uncomfortable in winter. But if you were a daimyo, this was your throne. You paced its corridors at night, listening to the wind batter the shutters, always thinking, who wants me dead this week? Castle life wasn't all war drums and screaming arrows, though. Inside, a daimyo's castle was a world unto itself. You had your war room, sure, but also gardens designed to help you think, spaces for no theater performances to impress your guests, and entire wings reserved for your concubines, your children, and your extremely nervous cooks. And security. Let's just say the phrase, open floor plan, wasn't in vogue. Servants were vetted. Food was tasted. The walls themselves whispered. Spies weren't just a threat, they were expected. It was said that Tokugawa Ieyasu, spoiler, future big boss, once had his sandals inspected for poison needles every morning. Sounds paranoid? Maybe. But he outlived nearly all his enemies. So, maybe not. The quirky bit. Some castles had nightingale floors, planks that squeaked musically when walked on, designed to alert guards to intruders. So yes, your floor was literally singing to you. But in an ominous, someone is sneaking up on you kind of way. Outside, the layout of the surrounding castle town mattered too. Daimyo weren't just building for themselves, they were orchestrating control. Roads were bent, not straight. Gates had deliberate choke points. Merchants were placed near the main roads. Samurai residences sat closest to the castle walls, ready to form a protective ring if needed. Peasants. You guessed it, pushed farthest out, first to get raided, last to get warned. And this is no static environment. Castles were often built, burned, and rebuilt. Remember that whole constant war thing? Yeah. A daimyo might spend years creating a masterpiece stronghold, only for a rival to roll in with fire arrows and turn it into smoldering kindling. The ashes would barely cool before a new one began rising, usually with thicker walls and more terrifying traps. There's still scholarly debate over how many of these castles truly followed strict architectural principles versus just evolving on the fly. Some historians argue that early Yamashiro were more like military camps than fortresses. Others point to archaeological finds of intricate stone foundations and elaborate defense systems as proof of long-term planning. Either way, the result was the same, a castle that felt more like a living war machine than a home. You move through the outer gate, escorted by a grizzled old retainer who hasn't blinked once in 10 minutes. Everything here is tight. Narrow corridors. Steep staircases. Low ceilings that force tall enemies to stoop and slow down. You're not just being led to a throne room. You're being funneled through a maze of psychological warfare. Finally, you enter the main keep. It's surprisingly quiet. Tatami mats absorb sound. A soft drumbeat echoes somewhere deep within. You bow, because your daimyo is seated ahead, cross-legged, flanked by silent guards. He doesn't speak. He just gestures. You kneel. You don't breathe too loudly. He's deciding whether you're worth trusting, or using, or discarding. This is the heart of his kingdom. This one room. You can practically feel the weight of past decisions lingering in the rafters, alliances made, enemies executed, battles mapped on parchment still stained with blood and tea. Every daimyo's castle was a reflection of their mind. Some were elegant, austere, almost monk-like. Others were lavish, filled with gold leaf screens and imported Chinese porcelain. And some, especially the truly paranoid, were absolute death traps, complete with fake walls, hidden staircases, and basement prisons that have yet to be found by archaeologists. Not that you're going down there. The castle wasn't just for defense, it was also the stage for diplomacy, hosting other lords and envoys in tense, kabuki-level social theater. You'd bow too low, sip tea too slow, answer questions that were really tests, and leave knowing you passed, or didn't. But even castles couldn't stop the march of time. Gunpowder started creeping into the picture by the mid-1500s, and suddenly those high wooden towers weren't so invincible. Portuguese traders brought arquebus, early firearms, and everything began to shift. Daimyo adapted, of course. Some embraced these foreign weapons instantly. Others, more traditional, hesitated, and paid the price. Still, for much of the Sengoku period, the Yamashiro remained the ultimate expression of a daimyo's reach. You ruled from it. You died defending it. And if you were unlucky, you starved inside it during a siege, eating bark, rats, even leather, while enemy drums mocked you from the hillside. You step out of the main keep now. The winds picked up, and from this height, you can see the whole province. Rice fields ripple like water. Smoke curls from a distant village. And you realize, everything you see exists because one man had the will to take it, hold it, and fortify it against a world that never stops coming. The daimyo's castle isn't just his home. It's his warning. You're up before sunrise now, the air still cold and heavy with mountain mist. No birds yet. Just the low clink of armor and whispered orders echoing through the corridors of your lord's castle. Because today, you march. Welcome to life in a daimyo's army, where loyalty is expected, armor is never quite comfortable, and your chances of surviving the next month depend heavily on who your commanding officer drank sake with last night. As a soldier in the Sengoku period, you're part of a private army raised not by the central government. What central government? But by your daimyo. These weren't standing armies in the modern sense. More like feudal patchworks of conscripted peasants, semi-professional Ashigaru foot soldiers, elite samurai, and mercenaries who couldn't spell honor, but sure could swing a naginata. The core of this army? Ashigaru. Peasants turned soldiers, armed with spears, pikes, or increasingly, firearms. They were cheap, plentiful, and depressingly disposable. One daimyo allegedly said, Ashigaru are like rice stalks, you cut one, another grows. Ouch. No wonder morale wasn't great. But here's the quirky part. Some Ashigaru became skilled and rose through the ranks. One famously rose all the way, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who started as a sandal bearer and ended up ruling all of Japan. Historians still argue whether his meteoric rise was due to raw genius, sheer timing, or the fact that no one took him seriously until it was too late. Anyway, you're not Hideyoshi. You're just one of many marching along a narrow trail, gear jangling, back aching. Your lord has summoned his banners. That means full mobilization, villages emptied, blacksmiths working overtime, monks blessing blades, and wives quietly preparing for widowhood. War meant everything had to move. Supplies, weapons, armor, horses, tents. It was like organizing a music festival where everyone's armed and very, very grumpy. And the logistics. Brutal. Daimyo needed rice to feed troops, straw sandals to keep soldiers walking, and messengers fast enough to relay orders across mountain ranges. Remember, this is pre-cell phone warfare. Communication was done with signal flags, drums, and messengers on horseback who often didn't survive the trip. If your general says, attack at dawn, you better pray the guy carrying the note doesn't fall off a cliff or get eaten by wolves. Now, let's talk formations. Battle wasn't just screaming and swinging wildly, at least, not at the start. Daimyo armies used surprisingly complex tactics. Units were arranged with banners indicating clan affiliation. Drums kept the rhythm. Archers, spearmen, and gunners moved in coordinated waves. And if things got dicey, you had a kagemusha, a body double trained to look and act like the daimyo. That way, if arrows started flying, they'd hit the decoy first. Yeah, job security was not a selling point for that gig. Out in the field, you'd sleep in makeshift camps. You ate bland rice balls, drank suspiciously warm water, and tried not to complain in earshot of a samurai. Disrespect could get you flogged, or worse, volunteered for the front line. But for all the hardship, there was ceremony. Before battle, your lord might deliver a speech, something about honor, duty, and avenging ancestors. A little tear might form in the corner of your eye, until you realize the speech sounds a lot like the one he gave last time. The one where half your unit died in the mud. The armor? Iconic. Yes. Comfortable. No. If you're a samurai, you're wearing lacquered iron plates over layers of silk and cotton. It looks amazing. Demonic masks, dramatic helmets, maybe a family crest embroidered in gold, but it's hot, heavy, and makes sitting down a chore. A shigeru got lighter gear, a jingeisa hat, a breastplate, maybe a spear taller than a horse. Firearms are starting to change the game, though. Portuguese arquebus were noisy, unreliable, and slow to reload, but terrifying. Daimyo like Oda Nobunaga loved them. He organized gunners in rotating rows, reloading one while another fired. Imagine the sound, thunder in waves, rolling over the battlefield like some angry dragon belching smoke. And when the fighting begins, it's chaos. The well-rehearsed formations dissolve into a muddy blur of screams, blood, and mud. You hear men praying. Some are calling for their mothers. Others shout war cries so loud they drown out the panic inside. You charge because the man behind you is charging, and the one in front is dying. Some duels between samurai happen, yes, brief, elegant, terrifying. But most of war is confusion. You don't know who stabbed you. You barely know where you are. Maybe you fall. Maybe you don't get up. Maybe no one even notices. And here's a morbid little fringe fact. Soldiers sometimes tied identification tags to their armor, or hid written notes inside their sleeves, so their bodies could be identified. Because being left nameless in death? That was worse than dying. If your side wins, great. Your lord might reward your unit with a barrel of sake and some half-hearted praise. If you're a samurai, maybe you get a new blade or a better stipend. If you're a shigeru, maybe you get to keep your boots. But if you lose, well, hope you have that death poem ready. Captured samurai were often ordered to commit seppuku, ritual suicide to preserve honor. A shigeru? No ceremony. Just a sword to the neck or a pit somewhere nearby. There's one more layer: psychological warfare. Some daimyo used head displays, literally piling enemy heads in front of their camps to intimidate the next attacker. Others sent gruesome gifts to rival lords. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about sending a message. And now, as night falls and your unit huddles near a smoky campfire, you realize something. This whole war might not even be about your land, or your people, or any noble cause. It's about your daimyo needing to prove he's stronger than the one across the river. But tomorrow, you'll march anyway. Because he said so. And that's how it works. You wake to the soft crackle of embers and the ache of a ground that forgot to be soft. Smoke lingers from last night's campfire, curling into the cold morning air. Around you, soldiers stir, some silently adjusting armor, others quietly checking weapons, but everyone waiting. Not for breakfast. Not for orders. Waiting for the daimyo. He doesn't ride out like a Hollywood king on a golden horse. No. He appears in calculated silence, flanked by his personal guard, all gleaming lacquer and grim expressions. The moment his standard is visible, a rising sun, a hawk, a family crest you wouldn't dare forget, a stillness ripples across the army. This is the power of presence. A daimyo doesn't have to shout. He doesn't beg for attention. His arrival alone demands it. And it's not just the soldiers who respond. Peasants drop to their knees. Monks bow low. Even rival warlords have been known to momentarily pause when a particularly fearsome daimyo enters a battlefield. You're not just seeing a man in armor. You're seeing a symbol, a breathing extension of everything his clan believes it deserves. So what exactly makes a daimyo terrifying? Let's start with the obvious. He can kill you, legally, ceremonially, or casually. The daimyo is judge, jury, and executioner within his domain. If you're a vassal who's screwed up, say, you failed to collect enough rice tax or let a rival messenger pass unchallenged, he might not even look you in the eye before ordering your death. Or worse, he might make you live in disgrace, stripped of your family name and lands. Some say death is mercy in these circles. But fear isn't just about blood. It's about unpredictability. You never quite know what mood your lord is in. Maybe today he's praising your battlefield bravery with a golden dagger. Tomorrow, he accuses you of harboring a spy. Same smile. Same calm tone. Different outcome. And don't be fooled by all the ceremonial bows and layers of etiquette. Daimyo politics are chess games soaked in sake and sharpened with suspicion. Alliances shift weekly. Promises are made in public and broken in private. One daimyo might host you in lavish splendor, only to have you poisoned 3 weeks later with a slightly suspicious bowl of miso. You remember that phrase from earlier, "The castle is a warning." Well, so is the man who owns it. His reputation spreads faster than his soldiers. People whisper tales about how he decapitated 3 messengers in a single morning. How he married his rival's daughter only to send her back in pieces. Some stories are exaggerated. Others, not enough. The truth is, daimyo had to walk a fine line between honor and horror. Quirky tidbit here, some daimyo deliberately cultivated weird or frightening habits just to keep everyone off balance. One lord reportedly held entire meetings upside down, literally hanging from beams in his private chamber. Another was said to consult his dreams before every major decision, keeping a dream scribe by his bedside at all times. Historians still argue whether this was genuine mysticism or just psychological warfare dressed in pajamas. And while the peasants feared his taxes, and the samurai feared his judgment, the daimyo's inner circle lived in a state of quiet, almost clinical dread. Because the closer you were to him, the more likely you were to be used, betrayed, or erased. Generals, advisors, even family members, none were safe. But let's pause and ask a big question here. Were all daimyo this terrifying? Historians still argue over that. Some daimyo, like Usuji Kenshin, were known for piety, generosity, and a bizarre obsession with proper salt distribution. Others, like Oda Nobunaga, reveled in fear and shock, once burning 1,000 monks alive because they stood in his way. Was it personal belief, strategic necessity, or a kind of personality disorder given permission to flourish? Scholars haven't nailed that down yet. Maybe they never will. What's clear is this: terror worked. The more terrifying the daimyo, the less likely his vassals were to rebel. The less likely rival lords were to test him. Fear was a currency, and a well-managed campaign of dread could be just as effective as 10,000 swords. Now imagine being summoned to his presence. You're a mid-level samurai. You've done your duty, fought bravely, paid your taxes, and now, a messenger says, "The Lord wishes to see you." Your stomach drops. You kneel for what feels like hours in his receiving room. No one speaks. The floor is so polished you can see your breath in the wood grain. Then he enters, slowly, like a storm cloud drifting over a calm sea. He doesn't sit right away. He circles you. Maybe he comments on the weather. Maybe he asks how your horse is doing. You answer carefully. Your tongue is dry. Then comes the question. Simple. Neutral. Do you think I should trust you? And just like that, your life dangles over a fire. He might reward you. He might accuse you of disloyalty. He might say nothing and dismiss you, leaving you to spiral in paranoia for weeks. This is the art of psychological control, perfected by men who couldn't afford softness, not even with their own kin. It's not all brutality, of course. Some daimyo genuinely cared about their people, instituted reforms, built schools and irrigation systems. But even those lords understood, compassion without authority gets you mocked. Mercy without fear gets you overthrown. You remember that as you watch your daimyo ride off toward the horizon, his banner flapping in the wind like a warning to the gods. He doesn't turn to wave. He never does. And neither should you. It's strange how quickly normal disappears. Just yesterday, you were a humble farmer, or maybe a merchant's son, or a monk who knew how to swing a sword. Now you're standing in a courtyard, barefoot, in front of a wooden post where a man is being tied up with thick, scratchy rope. His crime: theft, allegedly, or cowardice in battle, or perhaps just the misfortune of looking suspicious in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because in the world of daimyo justice, the definition of crime tends to shift like river mud after a storm. The daimyo isn't just your military commander. He's your judge, your jury, your local godfather, and your tax collector, all rolled into one terrifying package. His castle doesn't just hold swords and scrolls, it houses dungeons, torture rooms, and sometimes a small amphitheater for public executions. You know, for moral instruction. That's where you are now. Watching. Punishment is a performance, and in feudal Japan, it comes in many flavors. There's flogging for petty crimes, exile for political rivals, and execution for those truly unlucky, or truly disobedient. But it's rarely quick. That would defeat the purpose. Execution is about sending a message. For samurai, the preferred method was seppuku, ritual suicide by disembowelment. You kneel, compose your death poem, and slice yourself open with a short blade, usually with a second man nearby, your kaishakunin, to finish you off quickly. You know, to keep things tidy. Very polite. Very bloody. But you're not a samurai. If you're a peasant or lower-ranking soldier, your options are less elegant. Beheading, hanging, or the creatively terrifying method called boiling. Yes, they had that. Metal cauldron. Open fire. Usually reserved for traitors or especially unfortunate messengers. And here's a fringe tidbit. Some lords were obsessed with the art of heads. After battles, heads of enemy warriors were cleaned, powdered, labeled, and presented to the daimyō as trophies. Sometimes he'd reward a samurai just based on the number or quality of heads he brought. Yes, quality. A general once got demoted for presenting undistinguished heads. Imagine losing your bonus because the people you killed didn't look prestigious enough. Now, here's the unsettling part. The guy getting punished? He might be innocent. Or guilty of something you did last week. It doesn't matter. The spectacle isn't about fairness. It's about fear. About reminding everyone in the courtyard, including you, that the daimyo's justice is absolute and arbitrary. Historians still debate whether daimyo rule was truly tyrannical or simply a product of its time. After all, it wasn't like medieval Europe was handing out due process and warm croissants either. But some records suggest a few lords genuinely reveled in punishment. One daimyo allegedly kept a garden fertilized only with the ashes of criminals. Another liked to test his blades on bound prisoners, noting how cleanly the katana sliced through various densities. Back to the man at the post. He's not begging. That would be dishonorable. He's staring into the distance, maybe thinking about the river near his childhood home. Maybe wondering if someone he loves will be allowed to bury him. Maybe writing his death poem in his head, even though he's not a samurai. Then the signal is given. A guard steps forward. You look away, but not fast enough. The sound is wet. Final. And then the silence wraps around the courtyard like fog. Later, the body will be carted off. Or hung up for a while. Or burned. Depends on the crime and the mood of the officials. You'll return to your duties. The rice still needs planting. The gates still need guarding. The world doesn't pause for one less person. But deep down, a question gnaws at you. What if it's you next time? And here's the twist. Punishment isn't just physical. The daimyo can strip you of your name, your family's honor, your place in the village registry. That's social death. Worse than bleeding out. Imagine walking through your own town and no one making eye contact. Your children ignored. Your wife left to beg. You're alive, but erased. Even castles had spaces built for punishment. Small, windowless rooms called kara. Sometimes used for storage. Sometimes for solitary confinement. One record from the 1500s talks about a samurai locked in a kara for 9 months, fed only millet and rainwater, after laughing at the wrong joke during a feast. When he came out, his hair had turned completely white. And what about tatakimono? These were publicly displayed punishment devices, think stocks, cages, even suspended coffins. Set up in busy areas so everyone could get a good, long look. Public shame as a civic tool. Almost poetic. Daimyo justice wasn't just reactive, it was proactive theater. The idea wasn't to clean up messes. It was to prevent them through sheer, unrelenting dread. But that doesn't mean it was always effective. People still rebelled. Plots still festered in shadowed corners of tea houses. And sometimes, a lord pushed too far. One famous case involves a minor daimyo who imposed such brutal tax punishments that his own peasants staged a slow, coordinated rebellion. They refused to harvest, burned their tools, hid in the forests. It took 2 years and a small war to bring them to heel. Historians still argue whether the rebellion was spontaneous or manipulated by rival lords hoping to weaken the daimyo's grip. But one thing's clear: fear works until it doesn't. You walk back to your quarters, feet dragging through dust. The air smells like charcoal and flowers. It's always this weird blend after a punishment. Like life continues. Like nothing happened. But something did. You saw what happens when power isn't just obeyed, but worshipped. When the law is a sword without a scabbard. When justice isn't blind, but squinting through a helmet visor. And you wonder, is this peace? Or just a long, quiet war disguised as order? Tomorrow, you'll bow again. You'll chant the proper greetings. You'll act like the man tied to the post never existed. But you'll remember. You always do. You stand at the edge of a rice field, its water shimmering with late afternoon sun, and your hands ache from carrying yet another burden for your daimyo. Not metaphorically, literally. You've spent the last few days helping cart lumber for a new castle wall expansion. You're not a builder. You're not even paid. You're just obligated. Because in the world of feudal Japan, serving your daimyo wasn't a job. It was your entire existence. The concept is called giri, a sticky, complicated mix of loyalty, obligation, and personal honor that ties you to your lord like invisible chains. You don't serve because you love him. You serve because not serving would make you less than human. And this isn't just about you, of course. Your family. Also bound. Your parents sacrificed to send your older brother to a sword school so he could serve better. Your younger sister was married off to one of the daimyo's stable boys, not because she loved him, she didn't, but because it secured your family's standing. Your life is a complex web of unspoken debts, paid in silence, sweat, and the occasional stomach ulcer. Even leisure, when it comes, is borrowed time. You gather for feasts when allowed, perform poetry or no theater if ordered. Your laugh must never be louder than the daimyo's. Your sake must be sipped exactly 3 seconds after his cup is raised. Step out of rhythm, and you might not get invited next time, or worse, get assigned latrine duty for a month. And yet, you're still lucky. Because you're inside the inner circle. Now imagine you're a peasant. One of the tens of thousands living in the daimyo's domain, tilling soil that you don't own, growing rice that you don't get to keep. The daimyo sets your tax rate, usually in rice, not coins. You pay what he says, when he says, or risk punishment. Spoiler, you've already heard what that looks like. And what happens in a bad harvest? You still pay. Your kids go hungry, but the rice carts roll uphill to the castle all the same. Quirky tidbit here, some daimyo would test loyalty by intentionally issuing contradictory orders to see who dared question them. One famous lord reportedly told a vassal to burn the field and harvest it too, just to see what creative excuse the man would invent. The vassal brought back charred rice stalks tied in a poetic knot, and got promoted. Weird test. Weirder reward. But back to you. Serving the daimyo is a 24/7 gig. You're always being watched. Not just by spies, though yes, those exist, but by other vassals, your family, the castle guards, that one silent old monk who never blinks. Everyone's gauging your loyalty like it's tea temperature, just right, or scalding. Sometimes, the daimyo will call for loyalty displays. These are little exercises in devotion. You might be asked to shave your head, fast for a week, or recite clan poetry during a storm. Symbolic acts, sure, but also tests. If you grumble, even in private, that might reach someone's ears. And those ears report to the top. Historians still argue whether this web of servitude was sustainable long-term or simply held together by constant fear. Some believe that the endless ritual and control provided stability in a dangerous world. Others think it built an invisible pressure cooker that eventually boiled over in uprisings, betrayals, and internal collapse. Probably both. And then there are the emotional games. Say the daimyo suddenly praises you in front of your peers. You beam. Your chest swells. He never does this. But then, next day, you're reassigned. Sent to a cold border post, far from home. No explanation. No farewell. Just a curt scroll. What did you do wrong? Or did you do something too right? You'll spend weeks unraveling that mystery in your head, alone in a hut, watching snow cover your boots. That's the genius of daimyo control. It doesn't rely solely on rules. It weaponizes doubt. You're not just afraid of your lord's wrath. You're afraid of losing his approval, which might be even worse. Remember that old friend you trained with? The one who joked too freely during drills? He hasn't been seen in months. People say he was sent to a logging camp to reflect. Others say he was sent nowhere, gone. But no one asks directly. That would be disloyal. Loyalty, after all, is the only coin that matters. Forget gold. Forget titles. Loyalty is the thing that gets you fed, clothed, sheltered. Betrayal, even suspected, is a death sentence. And not just for you. Your whole household could suffer. Your father's land could be seized. Your brother's name removed from the registry. Your children barred from ever serving again. The daimyo doesn't need to swing a sword to destroy you. He can just unwrite you. But here's the kicker, you don't hate him. Not really. Somewhere, buried under the layers of fear and stress, is a strange kind of respect. The daimyo keeps order, protects your village, maintains roads. When bandits attack, it's his soldiers that show up. When plague hits, he sends monks and medicine. Well, when he's in a good mood. In a chaotic world, having one terrifying authority figure keeping the wolves at bay is comforting in its own twisted way. You go to sleep some nights whispering his name in a prayer. Not because you worship him. Because you have to. And when dawn comes, you rise again. Bow to the castle in the distance. Wash your face in cold water. And get back to work, because that wall isn't going to build itself, and the daimyo's watching. Always watching. Your boots sink half an inch into the mud as you cross the outer training yard, a dull drizzle soaking your shoulders. This morning, the sky looks like someone forgot to finish painting it. Flat and gray, like rice paper left in the rain. But the mood inside the castle walls is far from dull. It's tense. The daimyo is expecting a visit from another powerful lord, and everyone's buzzing about how to show dominance without saying a word. Because in the world of feudal Japan, diplomacy was war, just with tea instead of arrows. Now, let's not sugarcoat this. Daimyo politics were blood sports in formal wear. These lords were constantly sniffing for weakness, bluffing for status, and crafting alliances so delicate you could slice them with a fan. And sometimes, they did. The folding kind. Razor-edged, of course. So today, you get to witness the theater that is daimyo diplomacy. First things first, appearance. The visiting daimyo arrives with a retinue of 30 warriors, each handpicked for muscle and mustaches. Their armor is polished so brightly it's almost rude. Their banners flutter like they're auditioning for an epic. But your lord is ready. His retainers line the castle steps in full formal gear, no mismatched socks, no crooked sashes. Even the guard spears are aligned like teeth in a comb. Everything is meant to signal, we are strong. We are organized. We didn't just throw this together during breakfast. And yet, no swords are drawn. No threats exchanged. That would be uncivilized. Instead, it begins with gifts. Your lord presents lacquered boxes containing rare incense, preserved chestnuts, a painting from a Kyoto monk, and weirdly, a perfectly spherical stone from a sacred mountain. What's the message? No one says. But everyone knows. In daimyo circles, a gift isn't just a gift, it's a coded message, a social riddle with consequences. The rival lord nods. His own offering. A live crane, tied gently at the feet, with a red ribbon around its neck. You're not sure if that's meant to flatter or insult. Quirky historical note here. Some daimyo reportedly trained monkeys to present gifts during diplomatic meetings. The logic being, look how powerful I am, I don't even need to touch the tribute myself. One lord even had a crane deliver a scroll. The crane, naturally, pooped on the tatami. That meeting didn't go well. Now we move to the feast, or what passes for one when everyone's trying not to accidentally start a war with chopstick placement. The seating is prearranged like a chessboard, higher-ranking lords closer to the center, lesser retainers further out. You notice one of your peers got bumped back a row since last season. A quiet punishment, perhaps? Or maybe a reward in disguise, less pressure to sip sake on cue. The dishes arrive in sequence: pickled vegetables, steamed river fish, sweet bean paste, and something that looks like fried moss. You're not supposed to eat until the daimyo lifts his chopsticks. And even then, you mimic his pace like it's a slow-motion dance. Then comes the tea. This is where things get dangerous. Because the tea ceremony isn't just hospitality, it's a high-stakes performance. The host must display grace, discipline, and control. The guest must respond with equal poise. And beneath the surface, both parties are constantly judging each other. Does the host lift the tea bowl with enough reverence? Does the guest comment too little, or too much? Is that silence respectful or passive-aggressive? Historians still debate whether these ceremonies truly functioned as peaceful rituals or if they were just subtle ways to wage psychological warfare over wagashi and hot water. The truth is, probably both. Some records show that lords used specific incense blends known only to their house, tiny sensory trademarks of power. Others reportedly spiked the tea to observe the guest's reaction. Mild toxins. Nothing fatal. Just disorienting. Meanwhile, you sit still as a statue, watching everything, saying nothing. Because politics isn't your job, but survival is. Then come the talks. Not the kind with scrolls and signatures. No, this is all hint and implication. The visiting daimyo compliments your lord's koi pond, but pauses slightly before saying, serene. Your lord chuckles and mentions how some fish were imported from Edo. A flex, by the way. Edo fish are expensive. No one says anything directly. But every sentence is a negotiation, every bow an assertion. And you're the furniture. Or at least, you're supposed to be. But that doesn't stop you from noticing when your lord's eyes narrow, just a fraction, as the visiting daimyo casually mentions unsettled borders. That's a move. Later that night, after the guests have been escorted out and the sake cups cleaned, your lord holds a quiet meeting. Only his top advisors. You're not invited, but you're stationed nearby. You hear muffled voices through paper walls. Words like scouting, tribute, reinforcements. You don't need a translation. The piece, such as it was, is now thinner than a crane's leg. And here's the chilling part. This entire elaborate day, gifts, gestures, bows, and all, might have been just a calculated prelude to war. Or it might have prevented one. Historians still argue whether certain feasts directly led to invasions or simply masked tensions that were already boiling. One 16th century encounter ended with a toast, and then a siege 2 weeks later. Another supposedly ended a decades-long feud with nothing but a silent walk through a cherry blossom grove. Feudal Japan had a weird way of keeping score. By now, your feet are numb from kneeling, your stomach growls from a skipped meal, and your brain is looping over every word that passed between the two lords. Because one wrong word from either side, and you'll be wearing armor by week's end. Or worse, burying friends. As night deepens, you patrol the outer wall under a moon as thin as a whisper. Somewhere out there, beyond the distant hills, the other lord's entourage is riding home, already planning next steps. So is yours. Because in this world, diplomacy isn't peace. It's just war, waiting for better weather. You wake before dawn, eyelids gritty, dreams half forgotten, and the scent of burnt pine still clinging to your robes. The castle is quiet, but not still. Somewhere in the courtyard, A gong gives one soft clunk, like a throat clearing. You rise. Because today, something's brewing. The rumor slips through the barracks like smoke. The daimyō is preparing for battle. No declaration. No announcement scroll. Just the quiet assembling of armor, the sharpening of blades, the cooking of rice balls that stack suspiciously high. You've seen this before, when neighboring lords posture too close, when tribute shipments run light, when border skirmishes need resolving. The daimyō doesn't do speeches. He gives you a look, and you know what it means. Today, you prepare to march. You start by collecting your gear. Not that glamorous lacquered stuff from kabuki dramas. No, real armor is heavy, clunky, and smells like last year's horse sweat. You shrug on your breastplate, wrap the thigh guards, hydate tight, and cinch your helmet so it doesn't jiggle like tofu. You check your sword twice. Then once more. Your pack holds a week's worth of supplies: rice, dried fish, flint, and a tiny wooden idol your mother gave you. You're not superstitious, but you don't want to be the only guy on the battlefield who isn't carrying divine insurance. Outside, the courtyard fills with ranks of ashigaru, foot soldiers, grumbling and stretching. Some are conscripts, pulled from rice fields. Others are lifers, with sun-leathered faces and permanent shoulder kinks. You nod to a familiar face, old Sato, who once saved you from stepping into a pit trap during last year's failed siege. He lost 2 toes that day. Now he walks with a rhythm like a broken drum. Your unit leader barks an order. Everyone straightens. The daimyō appears, flanked by retainers, silent as a mountain. He raises his hand. No speech. Just a nod. March. You file out with the others, your boots crunching over gravel, the castle shrinking behind you like a forgotten dream. You walk past farmers who look away. Children who wave, unsure why. Dogs that bark once, then vanish behind doors. No one says goodbye, not out of rudeness, but because you might not come back. War, in feudal Japan, isn't fought like Western cavalry charges. It's slow, messy, political, and deeply personal. You march for 2 days before anything happens. Rain, mud, more rice balls. You learn that your daimyō has declared a corrective campaign against a neighboring clan. Translation: their last gift was too cheap and their taxes too late. Historians still argue whether these skirmishes were sparked by real provocations or invented slights. In many cases, it seems daimyōs picked fights simply to test their armies, or remind subordinates who held the whip. Quirky tidbit. There are records of samurai sending poems before attacks. Not as warnings, as taunts. Imagine being told your home's about to be sacked, via haiku. By the 3rd day, you glimpse the enemy. A camp. Tents arranged with care. Banners fluttering red and gold. Their archers already posted on a hill. Your heartbeat quickens. Your mouth goes dry. And then, the silence breaks. Orders fly. Units split. Your commander points toward the right flank. You run. Not march. Run. You think about all the things you haven't done yet. Visited your uncle's shrine, apologized to your sister, finished that fox carving you were making from driftwood. But none of that matters now. Arrows fall like angry rain. The man to your left collapses without a sound. Your shield goes up instinctively, not because you're brave, but because your body wants to live. You feel the thunk of wood against wood. You push forward. There's shouting. Steel on steel. And then, a man with painted armor lunges at you. His face is young. Too young. You raise your sword. You don't remember swinging. But the boy is gone. Your hands tremble. Not from guilt. Not yet. Just shock. The world slows. You smell sweat and blood and wet bark. You duck. You strike. You keep moving. Because this isn't about glory. It's about not dying. Somewhere in the chaos, drums beat. Your side is advancing. An hour later, it's over. Well, this part is. You stand in a clearing littered with armor and broken flags. A pile of enemy supplies burns nearby. The daimyo's colors rise over the captured hill. Victory. But no one's cheering. Not really. You sit beside a fallen log, sip water, and notice your hands still shaking. You wipe them on your trousers, ashamed. But old Sato just claps your shoulder and offers a rice ball. It's soggy. You eat it anyway. Later that night, as campfires dot the hills like tiny gods, you watch the daimyo confer with his top men. You can't hear them, but you know what's next. More marching. More fighting. Because one victory means little if the other lord refuses to bend. You lie back on cold earth and stare at stars. They seem smug, untouched, distant. Historians still puzzle over the psychological toll of samurai warfare. Some argue that the Bushido Code kept soldiers spiritually resilient. Others point to poems and journals filled with despair, homesickness, and haunting guilt. It's clear that even hardened warriors didn't come back whole. If they came back at all. You close your eyes. Try not to think of the young boy in red armor. Try to remember your mother's voice, humming while hanging winter herbs. And hope you're strong enough to wake up tomorrow and do it all again. Because war isn't just a storm you weather. It's the ocean you're expected to swim in, forever. Morning comes, as it always does, without asking whether you wanted it. The mist clings low to the grass, wrapping your camp like a damp blanket. Your armor is cold. Your back aches. And your rice ball has a rock in it. You're still alive. That counts for something. After yesterday's skirmish, there's no grand parade. No, we did it moment. Just laundry lines hung between tree trunks, blood being scrubbed from sleeves, and the occasional scream from the medical tent. A samurai with a missing hand sings softly to himself, off-key but calm. You try not to listen too closely. Today, your orders are simple. Secure the area. Sounds boring, right? That's where you're wrong. Because post-battle security isn't just about poking bushes and waving flags. It's about what happens to the losers. You're assigned to a squad retrieving enemy corpses for identification. It's not the most glamorous task. Some of the dead are still clutching their weapons. Others look asleep, until you touch them and realize they're colder than the steel in your scabbard. One even has a smile frozen on his face. You wonder what he was thinking when the arrow struck. But then comes the real surprise. A survivor. Young. Barely out of boyhood. Wounded, but breathing. He looks at you with wide, glassy eyes. He doesn't beg. Just waits. Your squad leader hesitates. And here's where the rules get muddy. Technically, a captured samurai can be ransomed or recruited. But practically, depends on the mood, the lord, the politics, and whether anyone's watching. You glance at the boy. He's not much older than your youngest brother. The commander finally waves him away. Bind him. We'll bring him to camp. A mercy? Maybe. Or maybe your lord wants to use him in a message. Back at camp, prisoners are separated from supplies and valuables. Some will be questioned. Others will be paraded. See, in feudal Japan, how you treated prisoners wasn't just about honor, it was performance. If your daimyo publicly showed mercy, it meant strength. Control. I can spare my enemies because I fear nothing. But if he ordered executions? That also sent a message, defy me and this is what happens. You've seen both. Once, a lord pardoned an entire enemy squad and gave them food before sending them home with a stern warning. Another time, prisoners were beheaded at sunrise while a priest rang a bell for each fallen head. Historians still debate the political strategy behind these acts. Were they moral choices, or carefully calculated moves to gain favor or infamy? Some scholars argue that honor was just branding, PR with a katana. As for you, you just try to avoid looking the captives in the eye. Later, you're assigned to guard a supply line. Sounds dull, but it's worse. The roads are slick with mud, carts keep breaking down, and bandits have started sniffing around like wild dogs. You remember what one merchant said last year? I'd rather fight a Ronin than haggle with your soldiers. Charming. Still, you get a taste of daily logistics, and wow, it's ugly. Horses need feeding. Water has to be boiled. Some idiot misplaced 2 barrels of dried fish. That's a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. And the mail? Oh, don't get started. Messengers dart in and out of camp like bees on sake. Some letters bring news from allies. Others from spies. One scroll carries only a single word, delay. What does it mean? You don't ask. But you know enough now to understand that wars aren't won on the battlefield alone. They're won in tents, around low tables, with maps and pebbles and tea going cold. They're won through whispers, blackmail, betrayal, and sometimes, blind luck. You overhear your captain mutter that a neighboring lord just switched sides. This campaign might be over before the enemy even knows it. That night, the daimyō addresses the camp. Finally. He doesn't shout. He doesn't gesture. He just speaks, low, clear, and terrifyingly calm. The enemy has lost heart, he says. But we cannot. A cheer goes up, but it's thin. Tired. You know morale is slipping. Even samurai need sleep, and you haven't seen a bathhouse in a week. You're dismissed and head back to your sleeping role. Along the way, you pass the young prisoner again. He's tied to a tree, eyes half closed. You offer him water. He doesn't say thank you, but he drinks. Quirky historical side note? Some daimyos hired traveling puppeteers to perform morality plays in camp after battles. Not for the soldiers, for the commanders. A reminder, perhaps, that fate is fickle, honor is fleeting, and even the mightiest can become a footnote. As you lie down under the stars again, you wonder if your name will ever appear in a scroll. Probably not. But maybe, if you survive this campaign, you'll finally finish that fox carving. You turn onto your side, adjust the straw under your neck, and let the sounds of the sleeping camp lull you. Snoring, wind through pine needles, a distant owl. Tomorrow, new orders. Maybe new battles. But for now, you breathe deep, blink slowly, and let yourself drift. Because even warriors need to rest. The dream is short and strange. You're back home, sitting by a river that flows uphill, and your brother is offering you a fish with human teeth. You ask him what it means, but he just laughs and the water starts to boil. You wake up sweating. It's still dark, but there's movement, quiet, calculated. You know that sound by now. Mobilization. Another dawn march, another calculated move in your daimyo's strange and brutal game of chess. But today feels different. There's a buzz in the air, like static before a lightning strike. You quickly gear up, and by the time the sun begins its sluggish crawl over the misty horizon, you're already marching again. This time toward a castle. Now, you've seen castles before. Not the romantic stone fairy tales from Europe. These are layered wooden fortresses, perched like birds of prey on jagged hills. Built to blend in with the land. Covered in white plaster walls that gleam like bone under morning light. Roofs that curve like they're scowling at you. This one is imposing. Not huge, but clever. You can see the steep incline, the switchback paths, the layers of gates. You spot arrow slits and murder holes. Someone in your squad mutters, "Looks like a porcupine waiting for a hug." No one laughs. You're briefed during a hushed huddle on a rice-terraced slope. The plan, divide the forces, stage a false retreat on the west side to lure defenders out, then strike from the rear gate at dusk. A risky play. But if it works, you'll breach the castle in one day. Historians still debate whether daimyo tactics like this were pure genius or overly ambitious. Some castles held out for months with only rainwater and rice wine. Others fell in an afternoon because a gatekeeper got drunk and left a door unbarred. You advance toward the rear approach. Steep, narrow, and coated in slippery moss. You crawl more than climb. The men ahead of you move like ghosts. No one talks. You don't even cough. Every twig feels like it's cracking straight into the heavens. Then, a horn. Not yours. The west side attack has started. You hold your breath. You wait. Your captain gives the signal. And then everything happens at once. Your squad bursts forward. The rear gate is smaller than you thought. A few guards scramble out, surprised but vicious. You dispatch one, barely dodging a spear jab meant for your ribs. Another soldier behind you trips. You step over him. You'll mourn later. Inside the courtyard, it's chaos. Samurai pour from doorways. Smoke begins to fill the air. Someone lit the rice stores on fire to create confusion. It works. You can barely see. You follow the glint of a friendly banner. You think it's friendly. You hope. Somehow, you make it to the inner keep. The defenders are cornered. Outnumbered. You're covered in sweat and soot. And then, you see him. Their lord. Not in gilded armor. Not on horseback. Just standing on the wooden veranda, calm as a monk in prayer. He doesn't flinch when surrounded. Doesn't beg. He raises his hands. The fighting pauses. Your daimyō approaches. And what follows is a scene you've only heard in old stories, a surrender without words. The defeated lord removes his short blade from his belt and offers it with both hands. A formal gesture. An act older than your family tree. But your daimyō doesn't accept it. He nods once to one of his men. The message is clear, no ritual suicide today. Why? Mercy. Mockery. A message? You may never know. That evening, you help secure the castle. You sleep on tatami mats far nicer than any you've ever known. You eat real food, hot broth, steamed buns, pickled plum. Your squad shares a flask of stolen sake. Someone starts humming an old ballad. And you start to relax, just a little. Quirky fact. Some castles had hidden escape routes built into the floors, trapdoors under tatami, crawl spaces behind walls. You accidentally find one while leaning back too far against a pillar. Just a drafty hole and a startled rat, but still, you make a mental note. By midnight, the captured lord and his surviving samurai are gone. Moved to another stronghold, they say. Or executed. Or quietly retired to some monastery. Rumors flutter like moths, but no one confirms anything. You step out into the courtyard and look up at the stars. They're the same as before, but you feel different. This victory is real. Tactically clean. Morally muddy. And still, just another move on your lord's board. Historians still argue about what happened to lords who surrendered. Some were integrated. Others assassinated weeks later. Many simply vanished from records. History has a habit of forgetting those who didn't die dramatically. You won today. But tomorrow? Another castle. Another plan. Another roll of the dice. You lie down beneath a paper screen door that creaks softly in the breeze and close your eyes. For once, you let yourself believe you might sleep soundly. Just for a night. You wake not to shouting or marching, but to a flute. A real one. Delicate, wandering notes drifting through the morning air like the breath of some sleepy forest spirit. You blink. You're still in the castle. Not dead. Not injured. And not being ordered to pack up and move at some ungodly hour. Is this what peace feels like? You step into the main hall, and it's like entering another world. The stone grit of battlefield life is gone, at least for now. Samurai in cleaner robes, no bloodstains for once, are kneeling in orderly rows. Servants dart like shadows, carrying trays of warm miso and rice. You're handed a folded letter. Orders. You're to stay behind. That's right. Garrison duty. A dozen of you are left to guard the newly acquired castle while the rest of the army moves on. It feels like being picked last for a team, except the prize is fewer arrows to dodge. You're not complaining. Your job. Keep watch, maintain order, and ensure the remaining villagers and former staff don't stir up trouble. Simple. Boring. Suspiciously calm. But peace in a daimyo's court is always a performance. You learn fast that a lord's household is part theater, part trap. Rooms are arranged to control sight lines. Servants whisper behind fans. Courtiers bow, but you can never tell if it's out of respect or survival instinct. And then there's the concubines. You're told not to speak to them. You don't plan to, but one smiles at you in the garden. Not flirtatious. Just tired. Like someone who's seen too much. Later, one of your fellow guards disappears. They say he left to deliver a message. You saw him the day before, sharpening his blade. Didn't look like a man with travel on his mind. Historians still argue over how much power castle women wielded. Some claim they acted as silent advisors, spying on guests and passing information to the daimyō. Others dismiss that as myth, romanticizing what was really just a gilded cage. The truth. Likely somewhere in between. One evening, your commanding officer gives you a new task, escort duty for an envoy from a neighboring province. Now you're playing bodyguard. The envoy is chatty, annoyingly polished, and smells like cedarwood and pride. He quizzes you about your lord's health, his drinking habits, even his handwriting. You give safe, non-committal answers. He gives you a polished smile in return, like you've both agreed to lie to each other. 2 days later, he leaves a gift for your daimyō, a lacquered box with a single painted carp on it. When your captain lifts the lid, there's nothing inside but a folded poem and a sprig of pine. You're told not to ask. But later, you hear that a castle 2 valleys over burned down overnight. Poetic messages, silent disappearances, backdoor deals. Turns out being terrifying isn't just about swinging a sword. It's about mastering the quiet arts. Manipulation, appearance, diplomacy with daggers hidden in the sleeves. You spend the next few days patrolling the walls and listening to the whispers of the old castle staff. Apparently, the lord who used to rule here kept a secret garden on the east side, accessible only by sliding a panel behind a statue of Cannon. You investigate. Sure enough, there's a little door. Inside, a moss-covered bench and dozens of wind chimes. All of them silent now. You sit there longer than you mean to. Even terrifying men want places to be gentle, it seems. One afternoon, a minor brawl breaks out among 2 villagers outside the gates, something about stolen vegetables. You break it up, half expecting this to be some kind of distraction or test. It's not. Just poor people fighting over a turnip. Still, your captain warns you not to grow soft. You're sitting in someone else's victory, he says. Never forget that. Quirky fact. Some lords refuse to sleep in the same room more than 2 nights in a row. Superstition, sure, but also strategy. You can't assassinate a man who's always in the wrong bed. You try switching your sleeping spot the next night, just to see how it feels. It's mildly annoying. The next morning, you find a beetle in your helmet. You decide you're not cut out for superstition. Your time at the castle slowly begins to rot at the edges. Supplies get delayed. Servants whisper louder. One of the garrison members is caught sneaking messages to someone outside the walls. He's taken down into the cellar. You never see him again. You're starting to miss the clarity of battle. But one morning, just as the frost returns to the grass and your breath hangs silver in the air, a rider arrives. New orders. The daimyō is calling his men back. There's another war brewing, this time further south. The castle will be handed off to a regional steward. You're to return at once. You pack your gear in silence. You walk through the hallways one last time, past the silk screens, the incense burner that never quite masked the scent of tension, and the now quiet wind chime garden. It doesn't feel like leaving home. It feels like vacating a stage. You pass the concubine again. This time she doesn't smile. Just nods, barely, as if to say, "You'll be back. Or someone like you will." She's probably right. Because in the endless churn of ambition, castles change hands like dice in a gambler's palm. But people are just pieces. You mount your horse. Back to the road. Back to fear. Back to purpose. The trail south is narrower than you remember, twisting through cedar groves where the light barely touches the path. It smells of rain-drenched bark and old secrets. Your horse steps cautiously, as if even it can sense the weight of what's coming. You're not alone. A column of soldiers stretches ahead and behind you, silent and alert. Nobody's laughing. Nobody's singing. You all heard the rumors. A daimyō has died. Not yours. Not yet. But one from a nearby province. The moment he stopped breathing, 3 rival families began sharpening their swords. No clear air, no stable succession, just a power vacuum the size of Kyoto itself. You're being moved closer to the borderlands, to show presence, as the captain put it. Which is samurai speak for, we might need to intimidate or kill someone, depending on how the next team meeting goes. There's a difference between war and tension. War is loud, fast, and brutal. Tension is a blade held just behind your neck. 4 days. You set up camp near a shallow river. Birds sing like nothing's wrong. You patrol the perimeter twice a day, rehearsing scenarios in your head: attack, retreat, ambush. No one says it out loud, but everyone's waiting for a spark. Historians still argue whether these border standoffs were pre-war maneuvers or just glorified staring contests. Some turned violent. Others resolved through arranged marriages, suspicious accidents, or entire villages mysteriously disappearing. There are no records of the villagers, only records of their lands changing hands. Your daimyō holds a council one misty morning. You're posted just outside the room. Through the rice paper walls, you catch fragments: treaty gift, soft threat, reinforce the river flank. That last one's your assignment. So you build. For the next week, your unit works on fortifying a ridge overlooking the river. You dig trenches, sharpen bamboo stakes, and haul logs into barricades. You don't see the enemy, but you feel them. One night, a deer crashes through the camp and everyone draws their swords at once. False alarm. But no one goes back to sleep. That's tension for you. You're given a new uniform crest, a bright yellow emblem stitched onto your shoulder. The captain says it's for visibility. The men say it's to mark who's expendable. You don't ask which is true. And then, just when you've memorized the layout of every hill and grove within a mile, a letter arrives. The envoy you escorted weeks ago? He's been assassinated. Poisoned tea. Whispers say the culprit wore your lord's crest. That's all it takes. You're now officially in hostile territory. Your orders change overnight. Patrols double. Night watches triple. You're told to keep your armor on, even while you sleep. Which, by the way, you barely do. One morning, you find a severed arrow stuck in a tree near the camp. It's not from your stockpile. That night, someone tries to set fire to the supply tents. They fail. But the message is clear. This is no longer tension. This is the prelude. And just like that, you're thrown back into it. But here's the twist. Your first real engagement doesn't happen on a battlefield. It happens during a negotiation. You're assigned to guard a temporary meeting hall, built practically overnight in a field, with open walls and fresh tatami mats. The lords meet inside. You and 24 other samurai stand just outside, pretending not to listen. But of course you do. One lord is offering grain. Another wants hostages. Your lord counters with promises. Promises are like coins here, shiny and empty. Historians still debate whether these councils accomplished anything or just prolonged bloodshed. One theory says the talks were always meant to fail, just stalling while reinforcements arrived. And right on cue, a messenger arrives mid-meeting. A minor fort near the border has been seized. Negotiations collapse like paper in rain. You're ordered to escort the delegates out. It's supposed to be a formality, a gesture. But halfway through the clearing, one of the enemy samurai spits at your feet. You look at him. You shouldn't. But you do. And in that half-second, everything becomes potential. Potential death, potential insult, potential incident. Your captain steps in, says a calming phrase, forces a laugh. The moment passes. But something shifts in your chest. It's not about the insult. Not really. It's that you realize just how thin the veneer is. All this, armor, protocol, tea ceremonies, folded fans and embroidered screens, it's decorated war. The same brutality, better dressed. That night, you find yourself staring at the stars again. You remember the wind chime garden. The concubine's tired smile. The ghostly flute song. You're beginning to understand something that nobody teaches you as a recruit. Terrifying doesn't always mean loud. It doesn't always mean blood. Sometimes, terrifying is the man who smiles during negotiations. Sometimes, it's the absence of birdsong. Sometimes, it's a sealed letter with no words, just a sprig of pine and a folded poem. You don't sleep that night. And you don't bother pretending to try. The next morning, the river mist clings a little thicker. Not in a poetic way. In a choking, smothering way, like the world itself is holding its breath. And when your captain emerges from his tent, face grim, helmet already on, you know the breath is about to be exhaled. Orders are terse. The fort that fell yesterday? You're taking it back. At dawn. You saddle your horse in silence. Every piece of armor feels heavier than usual. Even your sword seems reluctant. This isn't a glorious siege or a battlefield duel. This is a scrappy little skirmish over a half-rotted wooden fort on the edge of a rice paddy. But in this game of feudal chess, every square matters. You march. Through sucking mud and bamboo groves, under low, angry clouds. The fort itself barely deserves the name, just a stockade wall and a few raised watch huts. But there are archers behind those logs, and likely tripwires, caltrops, and worse. The plan. Surround it. Starve it. Or, if it gets ugly, storm it. You're in the second wave. The first wave is mostly spearmen and archers. Disposable, in the cold math of war. You pass them kneeling behind makeshift shields, their faces blank. Some are just teenagers. You recognize one from camp, the kid who always asked for seconds at dinner. He won't make it. You don't know how you know. But you do. Then it begins. Not with a horn or a flag, but with a single scream. Arrow fire rains. You charge when your name is shouted. You duck, roll, rise, metal against metal, mud against knees, shouts and groans. You've done this before. But this time, you slip. Your foot catches on something, maybe a tree root, maybe a corpse, and suddenly you're on your back. You raise your blade just in time to deflect a downward strike. Your wrist jolts. A second blow knocks your helmet sideways. You see the face of the enemy for a flash. He's just a boy. He sees yours. Hesitates. Then turns and runs. Historians still argue whether samurai followed a strict honor code in battle. Sure, the manuals say no attacking from behind, no striking a downed foe, bow before a duel and all that. But war is muddy, desperate, hungry. In moments like this, people make choices that don't make it into the scrolls. You push yourself upright, stagger to cover, and pat your arm where a stray arrow found flesh. Shallow, painful, but survivable. And the fort? Eventually, it surrenders. Sort of. The defenders vanish into the woods overnight, leaving behind a burning supply shed and 2 booby traps. One kills a spearman who was just trying to relieve himself behind a tree. Victory never feels clean. Back in camp, your captain congratulates you with a nod. That's it. No ceremony. Just a ration of sake and a warm rice ball that tastes better than anything you've eaten in weeks. You sit in the half-collapsed watchtower, staring at the horizon, and feel it settle into your bones. This is the job. It's not about glory. It's about momentum. Forward. Always. Until someone forgets your name and scratches it off a parchment roster. Your wound festers a little. The healer wraps it in moss and scolds you for not cleaning it sooner. You apologize out of habit. That night, your unit celebrates the retaking of the fort. Someone plays a biwa, terribly. Someone else tells a joke about a courtesan, a monk, and a horse. You pretend to laugh. Then one of the younger samurai, you think his name is Saburo, asks a question that stills the firelight. Why do we keep fighting for these men, he says. They gain land. We get blisters. Silence. He's not wrong. Your captain gives him a look that could peel paint. But you're thinking about it too. Quirky fact. Some feudal lords paid their samurai in rice, not money. Literally sacks of grain, based on land yields. If the land was good, you ate well. If it wasn't, well, guess who suddenly cared a lot about irrigation? You once received rice with weevils in it. Ate it anyway. Now, as your unit digs in, reinforcing the fort you just reclaimed, you overhear murmurs of reinforcements. Not yours. The enemy. A rival lord is marching north. And unlike the last skirmish, this one's coming with a real army. Horses. Banners. Siege carts. You're not told to retreat. You're told to hold. Great. So you fortify. Again. You sleep in shifts. Again. You learn the name of every arrow slit and blind spot and how many paces it takes to run from the gate to the fire pit. The calm before a siege is different. It's dry-mouthed. Clock ticking. You polish your sword because there's nothing else to do. You catch a rat in your bedroll. You name it Osamu. Then you let it go. No hard feelings. You write a letter to your brother. Don't send it. Burn it instead. Tomorrow, you might die. Tonight, the frogs are singing. And that, somehow, is worse than silence. Because it means they haven't heard the marching yet. You wake up before the sun. You weren't really sleeping anyway, just dozing in a fog of firelight and frayed nerves, waiting for something to break the stillness. When the first horn sounds in the distance, it doesn't even startle you. You just blink. Then another. Then drums. Low, steady, heartbeat drums. Not yours. The enemy is here. You climb the watchtower, your legs aching from yesterday's repairs, and peer over the palisade. The forest has gone quiet. Too quiet, like a painting with the sound muted. And just beyond the tree line, you see the banners. Dozens of them. They flutter like indifferent gods, carrying the crest of a rival clan you barely recognize, some snake coil design in faded gold. You squint. Is that 200? 3. You can't count them all. The captain paces the upper wall, calm and methodical. He gives orders with hand signals, because shouting now would waste energy. You're assigned to the west rampart. Good visibility, weak cover. Great. The men around you murmur. One's praying under his breath. Another tightens his helmet strap so hard it cuts his cheek. You've seen this look before, the quiet unraveling, the private negotiations with fate. And then the arrows come. Not a few warning shots, a volley. A swarm. The sky darkens for a moment, and you duck behind your shield just in time to hear the crack of shafts splintering against wood and bone. A spearman to your left drops like a sack. An archer screams for his mother. You don't even have time to help them. Another volley's already screaming down. Your muscles move before your brain catches up. You grab a bow, take aim, fire. Mississippi, try again. Miss again. Doesn't matter. The important thing is that you keep them ducking. Historians still debate how much formal strategy was used in small-scale sieges like this. Some say commanders used tactical scrolls passed down through generations. Others think most of it was just controlled chaos dressed in nice calligraphy. You cling to your wall for what feels like hours, ducking and firing and reloading until your fingers bleed. Then, silence. They're regrouping. You wipe sweat and ash from your eyes and look beyond the trees again. The enemy has siege ladders. Not 1. Not 5. 10. They're coming. The captain shouts now, real words, full of bark and urgency. Archers are repositioned. Spears bristle along the top wall. Boiling oil is hoisted into place. You're handed a torch and told to wait for the third ladder. You nod. You don't ask what happens if you miss. The enemy charges. It's a wave. A beautiful, terrible wave, precision in motion, men yelling their ancestors' names, banging swords on shields, sprinting through a field of death. First ladder goes up. Oil. Fire. Screams. Second ladder. Same. Then the third. Your turn. You light the bundle of dried thatch and hurl it down. It misses. The ladder stays. Then a hand, gloved, bloody, grabs the top of the wall. You draw your sword and hack. A scream. A fall. But another hand appears. Then another. And suddenly, it's no longer a siege. It's a climb. They're on the wall. You're swinging like a madman, parrying, slashing, pushing bodies down like sacks of grain. A blade glances off your arm. You elbow someone in the throat. You slip, catch yourself, shout for backup. It doesn't come. You're alone for a moment. Then you hear Saburo, the mouthy kid from earlier, roar behind you, and for a flash, the two of you are back to back, covering angles like dancers at a particularly violent festival. He goes down, eventually. You think he's dead. Then he coughs. You drag him behind a barrel. Everything is fire and yelling and blood. And then, as fast as it began, it ends. The enemy retreats. Or what's left of them. Smoke clings to the battlements. You can barely see. Your ears ring like temple bells. A man with no arms stumbles past you and sits down like he's just finished his laundry. You look out across the field and see bodies. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The banners are gone. The ladders lie charred in heaps. You held. Barely. The captain says nothing. Just walks the wall, nodding to the survivors, counting the dead. He stops when he gets to Saburo and helps him sit up. You'd say something poetic here. Something like, "We earned our peace that day." But you didn't. You earned a delay. Because you know they'll come again. And next time, it'll be worse. Fringe fact of the night? Some samurai used small, family-made charms sewn into their underclothes, protection talismans from local temples. You wore one once. Lost it in a river crossing. You always meant to replace it. Never did. You sit by the fire that night, limbs aching, armor dented, fingers twitching from the aftershock. Someone passes around dried persimmons. You chew without tasting. You find yourself staring at Saburo. He catches your glance. "What?" he says. You shake your head. "Nothing. But what you mean is, I thought you'd die. I'm glad you didn't. Tomorrow, you'll bury the dead. Sharpen blades. Rebuild the wall. Act like this wasn't nearly the end. But tonight?" You listen to the fire crackle, and for the first time in weeks, you let yourself sleep. Not deeply. Not safely. But sleep all the same. Your dreams that night are jagged and short. Mostly memories, half rewritten. Saburo climbing the wall, except his face keeps changing. The captain with a crown. Your horse talking to you in the voice of your mother. You wake up sweating, with the taste of iron on your tongue, and for a moment you can't tell if you're still on the battlefield. You are. Because even when the fighting stops, war doesn't. The morning smells like blood-soaked soil and old rice. No ceremony today, just the ritual of cleaning, repairing, and tallying. You help gather the fallen. Not all of them are yours. Some of the enemy bodies still grip their weapons, rigor mortis locking their last moments in place. One of them, a young man barely 20, has an amulet tied around his wrist. It's a simple piece of polished wood, burned with a prayer for protection. Didn't work. You leave it. Burial comes quick. Shallow trenches, lined up like broken teeth along the edge of camp. The monks aren't here, no time for chants or incense. Just dirt and sweat and a few whispered apologies to the heavens. The captain reads a few names. Some he says clearly. Some he skips. You wonder who decides which deaths are worth a full breath and which just get a nod. You think about Saburo. He's alive, but barely. The healer says he might lose the use of his left hand. He jokes about becoming a calligrapher with one arm. No one laughs. The next day, reinforcements arrive. They look well fed, clean. You try not to resent them. But they bring word, your lord is coming. Not just a retainer, not a messenger, the daimyō himself. The man whose banner you've bled under for years. The man you've never seen. Whispers ripple through the camp. What does he look like? Is he old? Is he cruel? Will he reward you? Will he even look at you? You clean your armor. You rewrap your sword hilt. You try to brush the ash out of your hair. Why? You don't know. Some part of you still wants to be seen. The next morning, he arrives. Not on horseback, but in a palanquin carried by 4 men. His retinue is small. No need to flaunt when your name already speaks volumes. You catch only a glimpse as he steps out. Long robes, a narrow face, sharp eyes that scan the fort like he's counting cracks in the wood. And for a moment, he looks at you. Does he see the scar above your brow? The frayed hem of your uniform? The line of grime where your armor rubs your neck raw? Or is he just checking if you're standing straight? He speaks only once, to the captain. Thanks him. Offers no praise, no reward. Just says, we march at sunrise. March where? Doesn't matter. You'll follow. Because that's what a feudal lord does. Pulls gravity around himself. Whole lives orbiting a man who may never learn your name. Historians still argue whether daimyō were beloved or feared. Some say they inspired loyalty through charisma, through vision. Others argue they simply held the rice bowl, and hunger makes even loyalty taste like honor. After the lord leaves, the camp shifts. There's energy now. A purpose. You start seeing your fellow soldiers differently. Not as comrades. As competition. You know the Lord will be choosing men to promote, to send home with messages, to honor with coin or title. Maybe even land. And suddenly, the man who helped you tie your sandals last week? He's now the man who might take your future. You don't like that feeling. That night, you walk the perimeter of the fort. It's quiet. You pass the makeshift graves. The smoke has faded. The frogs have returned. And on the southern wall, you find the captain, staring into the distance like he's waiting for a ghost. Do you think he saw me? You ask. He doesn't look at you. Just says, that's not the point. What is the point, then? He finally turns. To survive long enough to stop asking. It's not comforting. But it's honest. You sleep light again. Not from fear, but from the creeping sense that you're becoming someone else. Someone harder. Someone with fewer questions and sharper edges. The next day, you march. The banners flap behind you. The armor clinks in rhythm. The Lord's palanquin glides over the road as though the earth itself dares not bump him. And as you trudge through rice fields and sleepy villages, peasants come out to bow. You're supposed to ignore them. Keep your eyes forward. But you glance anyway. You see a child pointing at your blood-crusted armor. You see an old man weeping as he bows. You see a woman holding a baby and staring at the daimyō like he might be the god she's been praying to. You wonder what they think of you. A hero? A monster? Just another hungry mouth behind a blade? Quirky fact, some samurai painted their faces before battle, not for intimidation, but as a kind of mask to hide fear. You once tried it. The paint ran into your eyes. You never did it again. You pass a burned-out farmhouse. Chickens peck at the ash. A dog growls from under a cart. No people. Just the silence left behind when lords draw lines on maps. You wonder if the war will ever end. And if it does, what happens to men like you? That night, camp is quiet. No fire. No singing. Just a tension in the air, like something unseen is pacing the edge of the woods. You wrap your blanket tighter. The stars are bright tonight. You remember the boy with the amulet. And for the first time in weeks, you pray. You don't know to who, but you figure it can't hurt. You wake before dawn. Again. This time it's different. Not the horns. Not the drums. Just the quiet, cold bite of a new morning, and the sound of armor being strapped, swords being sheathed, men coughing into the dark. There's a kind of hush over the camp, not fear, exactly, but something heavier. Like a fog of resignation. You eat cold rice and salted fish with your hands. No one talks. You chew, swallow, and wish for warm tea. Instead, you get marching orders. You're heading for the mountain pass. Not a skirmish this time. Not a border raid or defense. A full assault. A rival lord has taken control of a narrow choke point, vital for trade, vital for control. The daimyō wants it back. You are one of the many tools he's chosen to get it. No surprise. Tools don't get to question why. You march single file through pine trees, feet sinking in damp moss. The path narrows. The mist clings to your legs. The further you go, the quieter everything gets, until even your armor seems to whisper instead of clink. Then the smell hits you. Char. Rot. The unmistakable perfume of death. At a bend in the trail, you see it, a pile of corpses, old and stiff, some still tangled in their armor. Burn marks along the edge of the clearing. Failed attempt, maybe. A warning. The captain says nothing. He just orders a tighter formation. You don't look back. Eventually, the camp is set below the mountain ridge. Strategists gather over parchment maps while you hammer stakes and unroll bedding. Someone mutters, "We'll never take it from the front." You agree silently. It's built like a cliffside fortress, with sheer drops on 3 sides. But no one asks your opinion. You're given a job, night infiltration. You and a dozen others slip into the mountain under the cover of darkness, scale a narrow trail, and open the rear gate, if one exists. If not, you improvise. Historians still argue whether such missions were common or rare. Some claim they were mythologized later in literature, made to seem more frequent than they truly were. Others say they were standard practice, just rarely survived long enough to be recorded. You get no fancy speech. Just a nod from the captain, and a sharp glance from the daimyō himself. That's more terrifying than the mission. By nightfall, you're climbing the pass. The path is barely a path at all, just loose rocks and slippery shale, winding like a drunk snake along the ridge. One man slips and breaks his ankle. No one goes back for him. You're not even sure if he's alive when you move on. The air gets thinner. You tie a cloth over your mouth to keep from coughing too loud. Your knees scream at every step. Your sword drags at your side like a weight from a dream. Hours pass. Then, faintly, torchlight. A gate. It's real. You and 3 others creep forward. There's a guard. Alone. Dozing. You reach for your blade, but one of the younger men throws a rock. It lands near the guard's foot. He stirs, grumbles, stands. Bad move. You rush him. It's messy, desperate. His scream is cut short by your hand. Blood, hot and immediate, soaks your palm. You drag him behind a boulder. The gate isn't locked. You hold your breath and push it open, inch by inch, until it sighs wider on squeaky hinges. The fort is asleep. You signal down the cliff with a cloth torch. 1 flash, 2, 3. Then you wait. The assault begins like thunder. From below, cries rise like smoke, and moments later, the courtyard floods with your people. Men in armor, shouting the clan's name, taking the enemy completely off guard. You join the chaos. You're no longer a shadow, you're a blade. Steel clashes. Men fall. A fire is lit somewhere. You can barely see for all the smoke. You take a blow to the shoulder. You give one back. You lose your footing and slam into a wall. You keep going. Eventually, the fighting stops. The stronghold is taken. But the cost? Immense. Saburo didn't make it. The captain did. But he's missing 2 fingers. The daimyō walks the battlements that morning, his robes unstained, his voice calm. He gives no rousing speech. No thanks. Just a statement, We hold the pass. Prepare for retaliation. That's it. That's what you bled for. And you know, in your bones, that the war isn't even halfway done. Fringe tidbit? Some lords kept small bonsai trees even while on campaign, miniature reminders of control and serenity amid carnage. You once saw one get trampled by a horse. Seemed fitting. You stay on the ridge for days, maybe weeks. You lose track. You start naming the wind patterns. You watch the trees bud, then wilt, then bud again. Once, you find a letter, tucked into the armor of a fallen enemy. It's from a daughter. She asks when he'll come home. She says the peach blossoms are blooming and she saved him one in a jar. You don't know what to do with it. You burn it. Not out of hate. Out of mercy. The captain starts having coughing fits. The kind that make other men glance away, like if they don't see it, it won't be real. You learn how to mend armor with wire. You carve tiny notches into your scabbard, one for every battle. You run out of room. And one night, when the sky turns dark with rain, you find yourself praying again. Not to win. Not to survive. But that if you die, someone will remember you were more than a soldier. Even if just for a second. The mountain pass is yours, for now. But holding it proves harder than taking it ever was. The wind up here is sharper. Not just cold, judgmental. It cuts through your cloak and scrapes your skin like it's checking if you're still human underneath all that chainmail. You try to sleep between watch shifts, but the dreams are louder than the owls. You dream of old battles that twist into new ones. Of the daimyo's eyes following you even when you blink. Of peach blossoms that turn to ash in your hands. You're changing. You feel it. You used to fight for survival. Then for honor. Then maybe, just maybe, for recognition. Now, you fight because it's the only thing you remember how to do. Your meals are simpler now. Moldy rice, bitter herbs, once even a squirrel that someone insisted was practically a delicacy. You don't argue anymore. You just chew and swallow. Your armor chafes a wound on your hip. You try padding it with cloth, but it keeps reopening. You bleed through 2 tunics before you just stop caring. There are fewer of you now. The stronghold is held by ghosts and exhausted men. You and the captain lead patrols through the woods, watching for signs of enemy scouts. You never see them, but you feel them. You find a broken arrow one morning, still warm from the sun. The shaft is black lacquered, not yours. You take it as a message, they're coming. The daimyo sends a letter. No reinforcements. Just instructions, hold until further notice. You laugh when the captain reads it. You don't mean to, it just comes out. That ragged, too long on the battlefield kind of laugh. He doesn't stop you. That night, rain falls in sheets. It pools under the tents, runs off the walls, soaks your bedding. The fire sputters out before midnight. You sit in the dark and stare at your sword. It's not beautiful anymore. The grip is worn, the blade chipped. 1,000 tiny imperfections telling a very loud story. You wonder what the daimyo's sword looks like. Polished. Decorative. Has it ever actually tasted blood? Historians still argue how hands-on most lords were in battle. Some led from the front. Others stayed far behind, orchestrating with messengers and tea. It's likely your daimyo prefers the latter. In the morning, a scout stumbles into camp, mud-caked, bleeding, barely breathing. He drops to his knees and gasps. They're 3 days out. At most. The enemy. A force twice your size. Retaking the pass. The captain doesn't flinch. He just rubs his temples and mutters. Of course they are. You spend the next 3 days preparing. Boiling water. Stacking rocks. Sharpening every blade down to the last kitchen knife. You help build makeshift traps along the narrow approach. Spiked pits, rolling logs, fire pots hidden behind brush. You don't believe it'll make much difference. But it gives your hands something to do. You find a moment alone that evening. watching the mist settle into the valley. You think of Saburo, the boy with the amulet, the peach blossom letter, all the people you don't want to carry anymore. Then you hear it, low humming. You follow the sound. It's the captain, sitting under the eaves, humming a lullaby. Something soft and slow, from a village he never names. You sit beside him. Neither of you says anything. Not until he turns and asks, "You scared?" You nod. He nods back. It's the most honest conversation you've had in months. The final night before battle is almost peaceful. You get a dry blanket, somehow. A little broth. Someone even finds a bottle of sake and passes it around. You all drink in silence, watching the flames. You don't toast. You don't speak of glory. Just raise the cup, sip, and remember what warmth feels like. The attack comes just after dawn. Not with horns. Not with shouting. Just a sudden rustling in the trees and then arrows, slicing the sky like black rain. You duck behind the barricade, return fire, hear the screams as the traps trigger. You see men fall, both sides. It's chaos, like every battle. But something's different this time. You fight harder. Not because of the daimyō. Not even for survival. You fight for the man next to you. For the captain who taught you where to place your feet. For the memory of Saburo. For that girl who saved a peach blossom for her father. You hold the line. For an hour. 2. Then. A second wave. You're pushed back. Into the courtyard. Into the shadow of the very gate you once opened. They breach the wall. Steel against steel. Your shoulder gives out. Your blade slips. You take a hit to the ribs that knocks the wind from you. You fall. Not in glory. Just in exhaustion. But as you brace for the end, something shifts. From the ridge above, reinforcements. Not many. But enough. Your daimyō has finally decided the pass is worth saving. And just like that, the tide turns. By evening, it's over. You survive. Barely. But the captain doesn't. You find him in the courtyard, sitting upright, as if watching the gate one last time. His eyes are open. You close them. Quirky fact, some samurai believed their souls lived in their swords. That if the blade shattered, a piece of them died forever. You don't know if that's true. But you do know this. When you pick up the captain's blade and carry it back to camp, you feel heavier. That night, the daimyō arrives. He doesn't speak to you. He orders a pyre built for the dead. Not out of respect. Out of hygiene. You understand. You sit near the flames and watch the smoke rise like ghosts returning to the clouds. You don't pray this time. You just sit. And wonder who you'll become now that this piece of war is over. You leave the mountain behind. Not because the war is over, because it never really is, but because the front has moved. The daimyō has new plans, new ambitions, and the pass is no longer the bleeding heart of the campaign. You're reassigned to a castle near the coast. A stronghold that smells of sea salt and lacquered wood, where the wind carries gull cries instead of arrows. The transition is almost disorienting. After months of mud and pine needles and whispered death, the polished floors and silk banners feel like stepping into someone else's dream. But you don't belong to dreams anymore. Your new commander is younger. Ambitious. Talks a lot about strategy and legacy. Wears his armor like it's part of a play. He gives you a polite nod when you arrive, then promptly forgets your name. That's fine. You don't need names now. You're assigned to training recruits. Boys with soft hands and sharper questions than swords. They flinch at bruises and brag about duels that clearly never happened. You try to teach them footwork, timing, calm under pressure, but mostly you just watch them bounce off each other like pups. One asks you what war is really like. You tell him it smells like old blood and wet leather and someone else's fear. He doesn't ask again. On your off days, what few exist, you sit on the battlements and listen to the waves. The castle juts over a cliff. the sea forever chewing at the rock below. There's a village in the distance, barely more than a smudge of thatch and chimney smoke. You wonder if you'd survive a week there. Maybe 2. One of the older guards carves netsuke figures in his spare time. Tiny little sculptures from bone and wood. Frogs, monks, dragons curling into themselves. He offers to make one for you. You ask for a horse. When he hands it over a week later, you realize it looks a little like the one you lost during that retreat across the plains. You don't say anything. You keep it in your sleeve. Sometimes at night you feel it press against your wrist like a memory. Historians still argue whether veteran samurai were given quieter posts out of honor, or just convenience. Too valuable to waste. Too damaged to trust on the front again. You think it might be both. You start writing things down. Nothing elaborate. Just names, places, weather. A habit the captain once had. You borrow it, maybe to keep from drifting into fog. You even sketch sometimes. Your drawing of the pass is terrible, but it's real. And you label every cliff, every trap, every rock where someone once bled and no one remembers. One evening, the new lord hosts a celebration. He's made some kind of diplomatic gain, a trade deal, a marriage pact, something that sounds important and expensive. The hall is full of music and sake and silk. You attend because it's required. You stand near the back, drink quietly, and marvel at how clean everyone's hands are. A lady speaks to you, asks if you've seen battle. You nod. She asks what it felt like. You think for a long moment before answering, like drowning with your eyes open. She blinks, then walks away. You don't blame her. Later, in the quiet, you walk the halls and find the armory. Not the main one, the tucked-away chamber where damaged gear is repaired and old weapons are stored. There's a rack of blades, all chipped and rusted. You run your fingers along them. One feels familiar. Not yours, but similar. You wonder what happened to your sword from the pass. Whether someone picked it up, or buried it. You dream again that night. But this time, the captain smiles. And Saburo laughs. And the peach blossoms don't burn. The next day, the commander asks you to accompany a diplomat on a short trip inland. Nothing dangerous. Just a show of strength. You say yes. The armor feels strange when you put it back on. Heavier, somehow. Like it remembers more than you do. The road is quiet. The trees are in bloom. And for the first time in a long while, you allow yourself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there's life beyond blood. That being a soldier doesn't mean you stop being human. Not completely. Not forever. And as the breeze moves through the fields and the horses clop gently along the path, you let go of the breath you've been holding for years. One small piece at a time. Now that the fire has faded and the armor's been hung on its peg, take a long, quiet breath. You've walked through the misty trails of feudal Japan, trudged alongside the soldiers who lived and died for lords whose names barely echo in the stones. You've seen the weight of honor, the sharp edge of loyalty, and the weariness behind every bowed head. Let that weight ease off your shoulders now. There's no need to hold the sword any longer. The night is calm. The wars are distant. And the only battle left is the one between your thoughts and the soft, inevitable pull of sleep. Let your body sink deeper into the mattress. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the waves you once heard from that seaside castle. Imagine the lanterns flickering in the hallways, casting gentle shadows as you walk. No rush, no fear, just the soft patter of your footsteps on ancient wood. The smell of cedar. A breeze from the paper windows. A silent world, finally at rest. And in the courtyard, beneath a blossoming tree, a netsuke horse waits, still, small, carved with care. You're safe. You're seen. And you are no longer alone in the darkness. Good night, warrior.